Hello and welcome to Bright Wings, children's books to make the heart soar. I am your host, Charity Hill. The purpose of this conversation is to help mothers and fathers identify books that will liberate their children to embrace truth, goodness, and beauty. Today I'm going to be thinking with you about how to integrate our highest principles to the details of daily living. Especially, I would like to think about what rules do we need in our homes in order to affirm what is good. These questions were stirred up in me because recently I was reading The Hiding Place by Corrie Ten Boom, the story of her family living in Harlem and the role that they played in their community in protecting the members of their community from the Nazi regime. Corrie spends a large part of the book talking about their home life, their family relationships, her previous history prior to any of the darkness settling into their town. What I was really struck by was the great stability of her family and their habits, of the great ongoing routines and peacefulness they had in their family. They lived in the same home for multiple generations. Their family, across multiple generations, operated the same business of clock selling and clock repair. And they lived in this intergenerational and interconnected home. Their routines, they had routines for prayer, they had routines for their business, they had routines for their meals, and they had cultural routines that they carried out regarding visitors and tea. Their home was a great gathering place, and so was their business. I was struck by how reliable and safe their life was, how peaceful, trustworthy their whole life was. Corrie Ten Boom talks about her life being predictable and humdrum, but I think she only means that we would think it is that way. Really, as a reader, I was struck by how joyful she was, how accepting she was of her life, how she was fully present to her life. She didn't desire to be somewhere else or wish for another kind of life. She was fully awake to the possibilities of the life she was really leading. She had a stable life full of routines and, in a sense, limits. But this was the foundation that led to incredible bravery on her part, courage and resilience, incredible resilience. There was something about Corrie's life that allowed her to be the protagonist of her own story. The Nazis did not define her life. In the end, you find that really they just are minor actors, cruel and terribly human, but minor actors nevertheless. I found myself truly wanting to be like Corrie, wanting to be like her, wanting my life to be more like her life. Her life is different from my life in several ways. First of all, the instability and lack of routine in my life is very unlike hers. I just think simply of our after-school activities. For some years, there was this multi-child, multi-activities on the schedule. That schedule would last for 6 to 8 weeks, and then the activities in the after-school plans would change again. I think the trouble for us as moms is that love, in a certain sense, implies no limits. We want to give our children everything, so we run ourselves ragged, giving them all possible opportunities to develop their talents and in every possible direction. Gymnastics, karate, soccer, chess, ballet, art, music, ninja, scouts, volleyball, swimming, baseball, football, robotics, theater. We don't want our children to miss an opportunity to develop. And I'm with you. One of my greatest joys is seeing one of our children thrive at something they're doing. I don't know about you, but I know there's a tendency in me to never want to say no until I lose sight of the meaning of life. What am I doing? So the peacefulness and stability of Corrie's life, I call her Corrie rather than Ten Boom because she seems like a personal friend somehow. This peacefulness and stability that caught my attention at first was really part of a greater picture. It was a life that looked like it was fully integrated. I was talking with my husband about my experience of reading Corrie Ten Boom's The Hiding Place, and he suggested that culture is a proposal about the meaning of life and the means we take to achieve that meaning. I cannot really talk about the culture outside the walls of my home. But if we think about culture within the walls of our home, what are we proposing that the meaning of life is? What are we proposing is the means to attain that meaning of life? I think for Corrie Ten Boom, the meaning of life is love, is relationship with God and with others, and I find myself agreeing very easily. Where do we go with that? Well, most of living is done in the details, not in the big moments. So even though most of us would prefer to have a star soccer player than a kid who sweeps the floor cheerfully, probably the child who sweeps the floor cheerfully is going to have greater lifetime happiness. It's kind of painful to admit it. Do you remember those t-shirts that said, life is football, life is track, or life is music? The rest is just details. I loved those shirts. I wanted one because that's exactly how I felt about track and life, frankly. And let me make the point, there's nothing wrong with your life being organized by excellence. But in some of the wisdom I've gained since high school, I've realized there's a problem with me if I can't handle my own life. Why should I find my ordinary circumstances to be so oppressive? And this is why Corrie Ten Boom inspires me. She became great, but the basis of her truly extraordinary life was in the simple details of living beautifully, of integrating her highest principles with the details of life. What I noticed about Corrie Ten Boom's life is that her acceptance of limits brought her freedom and peace. That contrasts so sharply with our current lives. I think about the role of technology and all the different media. Technology, is monetizing our desires in all directions. To my imagination, anything is possible. And so the pressure to do more and be more builds and builds. The very mantra of technology is do. Think about how tasks have multiplied in your life since being able to just keep in touch with more friends. Has any of this really brought us greater satisfaction or depth? I think most of the time not. And maybe some of the time it robs us of our ability to be present to friendships happening in real time. It robs us of our ability to engage and care about others in real time. And I think we lose opportunities to have deeper friendships in real life. I know that this has been true in my experience. What I've also found to be true is that lack of limits does not bring me peace. I remember pondering a poster in grade school that said, if you can dream it, you can achieve it. But even as a fourth grader, I realized, hey, that's just not true. I remember how I wanted to be a gymnast. And hey, I'm not in the Olympics yet. But we're told over and over again that we should not accept limits. Wasn't some sports company's mantra, no limits? How do we make rules to affirm the good in the face of a broad cultural situation that tells us that novelty is the best and being free to do anything whenever you want is the most important thing there is, the freedom to change your mind? So I'm going to say something countercultural, and that is limits and rules are good for us because our desires do not always point north. They're haphazard guides. We know not every good is of equal value. And as with sugar, our internal thermometer, our internal measuring stick is broken. In fact, a thermometer is a good example. We have a forehead scanning thermometer here. We probably paid way too much money for. And it measures either 1.5 degrees too hot or 1.5 degrees too cold. But only sometimes. Sometimes I think it measures correctly. So I want to say that human desire is sometimes unreliable. Neither me nor my children are always going to desire what's good for ourselves. And that's where rules come in so that we have a framework to point us towards the good, a framework upon which we can rely. We can understand that technology is one of the main ways we set aside limits. Yet don't we all have kind of infinite desires? And I think we yearn for this not simply because technology has flooded our desire with possibilities, but it has a grip on us also because love, like I said earlier, love implies no limits. But I think we need to recognize the limits that affirm the truth about loving another, the limits that are built into human nature. As Dr. Scott Kreider said when I was an undergrad, we are limited, we suffer, and we die. To a bunch of exuberant college students, it sounds hilarious, but as I've reflected on this, I've realized how true it is. Loving another, our child, means affirming limits. This is like a lightning bolt for me. Affirming the good of my child means affirming limits, because limits are built into her human nature. Of course, there's a tension between the infinity of love, call it heaven if you like, and loving my child's finitude, her kind of earthly dimension. Today, though, we're going to focus on one side of this tension. We're focusing on the limits and our need for them. One of the things I want to propose is that accepting limits brings freedom and peace. And since most of our limits have been set aside, having limits now means making rules for ourselves. It means making rules for our families. These rules are ultimately there to liberate us, to embrace truth, goodness, and beauty, to help us embrace the kind of life we in fact really want. In this way, we can have a positive outlook on rules. We can see how they can become part of our freedom. In fact, they're already inside our freedom because they're helping us do the good thing that we want to do, live the beautiful life that we want. So rules aren't outside of me, but inside of me. And their status as a rule kind of disappears once it's something that I'm doing naturally. One of my daughters makes her bed every morning, not so much because it's a family rule, but because she's discovered that she really finds it restful and beautiful to have it made. In the event that she didn't feel like making it, the rule would be there to direct her back towards the good. But really, she doesn't think about it. She just does it because it's now internal to her. It doesn't oppress her. Maybe some of us have experienced how limits are liberating when we've gone grain-free or carb-free or sugar-free. After a while, we experience not even desiring the carbs or the sugar, but we in fact desire exactly what we have, the freedom and clarity and health that we made the rule for. We just don't desire the sugar, and the rule has just faded into the background. But if we needed it, it's still there, pointing us towards the good that we most deeply desire. Okay, let's really get into it. The question is, how do we integrate our highest principles with our day-to-day living? We'll boldly go ahead and propose that I think the meaning of life is love, especially that the meaning of life is relationships. So our home culture is really a proposal about attaining that meaning. One of the principles that helps us organize and integrate love as the meaning of our family's life is that we prioritize persons over things. And this plays out all over the place. Because we try to prioritize persons over things and relationships over things, we've created a number of rules to direct us. Because we prioritize persons over things, we emphasize relationships, character formation, and education over the accomplishment of tasks. Although, caveat, I'm shocked at my own desire to get stuff done at the expense of relationships. You'll probably also notice that our personalism de-emphasizes technology, individualism, and expediency, or doing things because they're convenient, or anything utilitarian. Stick with me, I'll give you plenty of examples. I'm going to think through certain dimensions of my life with you to help you think through yours. We have rules about relationships, work, food, sleep. Having meals together as a family is super important to us. When we don't do it, I feel really disconnected from what's happening with my children, disunified. The importance of eating together really derives from the beginning of my relationship with my husband. When we were dating, we spent huge amounts of time together, making food together and sharing food together. It was really transformative for us, and we connected a great deal over these long meals, and it's always been a part of the way we celebrate our family life. Typically, we sit down and eat together every night. This year has been a little different because we're driving a huge distance to and from school, and my husband has evening school-related commitments. So this has changed. We're eating much more convenience kind of food, like freezer food. I'm still making food, but the point is mostly expediency. It's still real food, but it's fast. There's not a lot of midweek Julia Child. And when my husband isn't home, I tend to eat dinner in the kitchen with the children. Shh, don't tell him. But I'm confessing this to you in all honesty because this is not something that our family loves, and it's been kind of sad and painful for us to have to change this emphasis this year. But I felt like our theme for this year in our new move is unity, and I think we're still pursuing that to the degree that we are able, and as well as continuing to emphasize persons over things. Sometimes the more convenient meal allows you to be more attentive to your children. All right, very practically. Nowadays, one of our main food rules is that we try to serve pasta only 1 to 3 times per week. And one of our liberating routines we've adopted this school year is that every Monday is the same breakfast food, every Tuesday is the same, every Wednesday is the same food. They kind of really like knowing what to expect in the mornings. Muffin Mondays, Daddy Bread Tuesdays, Waffle Wednesdays. We always have breakfast tacos on Fridays. You would have never guessed that a book podcast could give you menu planning tips, could you? You're welcome. Quite literally, when it comes to food, we try to shape our children's very palate for what is good, for what is healthy and what is good for them, and to make that as appealing as possible in a balanced way. We appreciate Michael Pollan, eat food, mostly plants. Grow it if you can. Make as much at home as you can. Okay, what else? We try to keep sugar pretty low. We used to serve dessert just a little bit. Like if we're talking ice cream, probably like 2 tablespoons, like small dessert every night after dinner. We've actually backed off and only have dessert Saturday nights and Sunday nights. We have rules about eating plants. Everybody has to have a plant at every meal. When they were little, also one of our rules was we served their carbs last after they'd eaten their meat and their plants. We don't apply that principle anymore because they're eating in a balanced way. Our rules about work are actually meant to prioritize people over things. Our chores are meant to emphasize that things are at the service of people rather than people at the service of things. What do I mean? Chores are about character formation and their education. And frankly, that's what makes chores such a chore. We want our children to learn that we need them and that they don't belong only to themselves, but we belong together. I'm trying to say in a nice way, the world doesn't revolve around you, okay? They each have chores every morning, making their beds, getting dressed, getting downstairs. They have to deposit their lunch and their water bottle into their book bag and empty their dishwasher before they eat breakfast. The poor darlings are waking up at 5:40 and they're in the van by about 6:45 every day. They're not milking the cows, but they're amazing. Oh, and just for the record, we don't have cows. After school, we've backed off a little bit because our expectations for the 5-year-olds were too high. We had them come in, bang out their lunch, put their communication folder on my desk, bang out their lunch and wash it and repack it. But that was too much for 5-year-olds. The older children could do it, but not the twins. So on Sundays after brunch, they're required to pack 3 lunches for the week. We front load our effort that way. But to be completely honest, I'm still packing the lunches, for the twins at least. The goal at this point is to get them to sit with me while I do it. Saturday morning, they all have chores. Usually it's a sink and a toilet, and we're having them repeat the same chores at this point so that they can learn how to do them well. We have them do the chore and then we check their work, and when they're done with their chores, then we go off and play together, or they're free to play with friends. However, you'd be surprised at how they seem to forget and find it shocking and life-destroying to be asked to do chores on Saturday morning. And so we've had too many unhappy Saturday mornings. So we're still working. We're still working at it, folks. But I have to tell you, these routines are really important to me so that I don't feel alone. So that I also feel like my children are being shaped into small people who care about others, who care about the good of their family, who have concrete ways to show their love and their service to us. So that's one of the reasons why I fight these battles, and sometimes it really is a battle. But I continue to tell my children after things calm down that I want to work together and I want to play together. Love is more than just having fun together. We need to work a little and we need to play a little. That's how it's going to be every Saturday. So they know what to expect. One of the most important rules our family has is a rule about relationships. From an early age, we've taught our children forgiveness. In fact, we've taught them a particular routine, which is, I am sorry. And then you have to name what for, especially the details that hurt the other person. We find it really important to name it. So I might apologize to my children by saying, I am sorry I was impatient and yelled at you when I was stressed out. I don't want to yell at you. Please forgive me. You might have to lead them through the other side of the story. Are you sorry, buddy, that you didn't listen to me when I asked you to get in the van? I'm sorry, Mama, for running off to grab a dozen more things before doing what you asked. I forgive you, buddy. We taught them a sign language sign for please forgive me, which involves making a fist out of your right hand and rubbing it on your heart in a circle. We call that the sorry symbol. And I'm not even sure that's a real one, but you can use it if you want in your family. And we did that for all those moments. For example, like when you're buckling your 1-year-old or less than 1-year-old into the car seat and you pinch that sweet chubby thigh. So they already knew from an early age that the tenderness of, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. We try to use that all the time for little things so that they don't become big things. But when things are big, we use it too. We do practice asking our children to forgive us so that they learn that adults need mercy too and new beginnings. And heck, because we need to receive mercy, we also, and I know this might not sit well with you, but we require our children to apologize at the end of certain events and fights because we really want to emphasize that forgiveness is a decision more than it is a feeling. Sometimes the feelings of peace come only after you have said the words of forgiveness. Nobody is, though, forced to forgive their sibling if they're not ready to yet. But if they're not ready, we always return to the issue. Our rules regarding forgiveness are one of the best decisions we ever made since we started dating. Definitely the best thing maybe we've ever taught our children. It is a rule that is truly liberating for us. And then another rule we have in our family that you might think is quite funny that governs relationships is that we have a rule about no reading when guests are over or when we're at other people's homes. And this is not a rule that's on the same level of importance as our forgiveness rules. I'm just sharing it with you because it's a kind of a silly example of how to integrate the great principle of love is the meaning of life and that people are more important than things. One of our children in particular is such a big reader that we had to make that rule for her because we need her to do things other than read, like know people. We made that rule because we want her to engage the world, and we made that rule also because we want our attention to be on people rather than things. So that's the good that we're trying to affirm is presence. Now we come to the great question regarding technology. How do you have rules about technology that actually protect family relationships? How do we have rules about technology that promote interdependence and personalism? Our conclusion is that technology supports these goals best when it plays a very limited supporting role. And by limited, I mean minimal, like as minimal as you can stand, and then one step more minimal. I'm afraid y'all are going to hate me. We arrived at these conclusions because of where we started. When my husband and I married, we didn't have a TV, and we weren't given one when we got married, and we were in grad school, and there was plenty to read, so we never missed it. And it grew to be a more deliberate decision. We have no TV and no tablets for the kids. And one of the reasons why we don't have a TV is we have found that it is actually really liberating. It gives us the mental, emotional, spiritual, relational room for more. One gigantic benefit is that There's already a natural limit built into my children's desire. They're not being flooded with commercials that tell them that they need different toys, that they need to watch different programs. They're not driven by any of these things that would motivate so many other kids, ways of acting, ways of imitating shows. Of course, we don't get to escape these things entirely. My son, who went to school, learned how to play Zombie Apocalypse. Hooray. Not having a TV has strongly shaped my family for the better. I have an 11-year-old daughter, nearly 12, who has absolutely zero, I think zero body issues. She just thinks she's beautiful and lovable. Oh my gosh, she is. She's not been flooded with messages that she's not enough. You remember earlier when I said we try to prioritize persons over things, and that means we emphasize relationships, character formation, and education. And that also leads to a de-emphasis on technology and individualism. So given a choice, we try to pick activities that are more human rather than technological. So that's activities that are more personal, more embodied, activities that are more hands-on over activities that are less. For example, we'd sooner go for a hike as a family or to go play in a creek or a waterfall than to see a movie in a theater. We can do that because we live in Austin. I couldn't go play in a waterfall or a creek in Illinois. We would sooner go to a trampoline park with climbing walls than play video games together. But given possible PDI, I would sooner take my children horseback riding as a regular thing than to a climbing place as a regular thing. Another example where we try to pick more personal embodied hands-on activities over less personal embodied hands-on activities is that when is waiting. So when we have to wait for an appointment or during an appointment, we will read together, or lately we've been playing chess. We draw together. We've been doing some drawing videos together. But before doing drawing videos together, you should probably, I think it's a good idea to show your children what you yourself can actually draw. And if you can't draw anything, that's also really funny. But to teach them what you know from drawing. You can see I'm not totally ideological about technology. I do use drawing videos. They do such a nice job breaking down the steps and helping my children gain confidence. Of course, if your child's very irritable and sick, I don't think it's a great evil to pull out your phone to help them wait for the doctor during an appointment. But in general, I think we could probably all acknowledge that we have a pull out our phones reflex when we have any waiting to do, especially when we're waiting with children. I feel like we have a need to rehumanize our little humans when it comes to the human condition of waiting. Our concern is that the internet, all these apps, provide a constant stream of novelty. If they're habituated to constant novelty, how will they ever learn to dig deeper, to wonder, pause, and become curious? If they're habituated to a constant stream of novelty, they'll go through a museum on their school trip with a checklist, like a scavenger hunt. Have you seen this? Umbrellas, Paris Street, Rainy Day, yeah, saw them. Pitchfork, yeah, got it, saw it. American Gothic, yeah. Stacks of Wheat, Monet, check. Inventions of the Monsters, Dali, yeah, check. Black Cross, Georgia O'Keeffe, check. Yeah, I saw all that. We did that. It was cool. We looked at art. If they're habituated to a constant stream of novelty, when will they begin to discover that life and the world is a marvel that can never be unpacked to all its mysterious depth? Our concern with technology is that it teaches our children to see the world technologically flat, without depth, and totally in my terms, individuated and solipsistic. How can this be used as a good for me? Please understand that I'm not proposing that all of my rules do a perfect job of integrating the principle that love is the meaning of life to the details of our family. I hope that they do a pretty good job. They're our best proposal about how to live out the details in accord with our highest principle. Given that limits are built into human nature, we can trust that some of these proposals we can trust are in accord with the limits that are true, the limits my humanity needs, the limits that my children's humanity needs. Hopefully sharing with you in this level of detail has helped you think about the way you integrate your highest principles to your daily life. And I understand that you, like me, are always trying to rethink what you're doing and reshape it for a gladder, happier life. And this kind of brings us to our next topic, authority. I think it's pretty normal to be wary of this word, but maybe like my husband and I, you too have realized that authority isn't a dirty word. We are not equal, and you cannot say that to me. In one context means you have to respect me. In another context, those same words show that I'm someone upon who you can rely when you're beyond your resources and overwhelmed. Right? We sleep in a house because it's comforting, because its strength keeps us safe. It's a place that we can rely on that is greater than us. Think of authority in that way, as something positive, as something that can actually correspond to the deepest truth of who I am as a limited being. Okay, let's think through authority with the analogy of the house. We sleep in a house because it's comfortable. We find its limits are more comfortable than sleeping outside on the ground under the sky in an unlimited way. I want to say for the record that I really enjoy camping, and I think all of us should probably sleep out under the stars at least once in our life. However, I think few people would prefer camping for their entire life to living in a home. There's nothing like your own bed. Now, limits make us comfortable. Limits keep us safe. Limits give us a structure upon which we can rely, to which we can attach ourselves. And we know from a psychological standpoint that too many choices and too many opportunities creates anxiety. So I'm giving you permission to go ahead and be an authority. Your map is larger than your child's anyway. You can propose a good and walk towards it. We're going to eat dinner now. Sit at the table. We are going to have a moment of silence before dinner where we think about our breathing. Given that your map is larger and more detailed than your child's map, they deserve it. They deserve your map. Your children need to be able to rely on you to lead them through the wilderness. They need you to tame the wilderness and to domesticate the wilderness. I give my children a map by showing them how to handle a new situation. I tame the wilderness by showing them how to be brave in the face of it. So I want to share a story about how me being brave helped my children. Last year, we moved from Illinois to Texas, and under stress and pressure and the fact that there are no guarantees in moving, that can lead to some anxiety. This was our third cross-country move and our fifth move in 9 years. Pretty intense. We were leaving a lot of family and coming to a new job and school situation that holds a lot of promise. And yet we're taking off into the great unknown, as you always do. Well, as we prepared to move and during the drive down, I decided very deliberately not to dwell on or linger over the things that I was going to miss. I mean, I would name the things and I would, but I wouldn't linger over them. And as well as I would encourage my children when, as they named things, we would just sort of name them and talk about it briefly. I made a conscious decision not to dwell on the imperfections or the possible imperfections of our new situation. I had concerns like we were moving from a historic kind of neighborhood and a beautiful old house with gorgeous wood to a modern construction. And the new situation was going to be very highway centric, as it is in some places here in Texas. We're going to be moving very far from family, and as yet we had no friends in the area either. And I was losing a really incredible community of women that I developed over some recent years. And I could have thought the most intelligent thing to do is to sort of like really go into the emotion of this, but tell my children like, but I hope for something great. I'm really going to miss this, in order to try to liberate my children to really like dig into their own emotions. However, I realized that I needed to be as brave and cheerful as possible, not denying the fact that we were going to miss things, but facing our new situation, which was coming at us, whether we were cheerful or not, we were going to best confront our new adventure if we were brave. And I thought I needed to be like Ma Ingalls and lead the way and be as cheerful as possible. I thought they would be better equipped to face their new situation by having a brave, cheerful, and reliable mom. I thought they would be better able to deal with difficulties if they come, as they come, and not by fearing them and rehearsing them ahead of time. Now, I will get a little humble with you. I had two somewhat irrational fears. One was that I was afraid of scorpions at our new house. And I was also, this was like an anxiety-produced fear, but I was afraid of acquiring bed bugs somewhere between Illinois and Texas on our route, wherever we were staying or eating. Now, as a person, as a mother who's an external processor, I process what I'm feeling and thinking by talking about it. But this is not always a healthy thing to be doing with my children. I very deliberately decided not to share those two fears with my children because I did not want them to be burdened with it. Turns out there are no scorpions in our house or yard, but along the way, my son did get stung, but actually by bees, and he had kind of a serious but mild reaction. Serious on the mild end. And at one of the places we stayed, it was a Airbnb, gorgeous place. It had preventative bed bug measures, so that was creepy. But I really confronted that anxiety and that exact problem along the way. It's amazing how this worked out. When my children saw the cups at the bottom of the beds at the very fancy Airbnb house we stayed at, did I go into a lot of detail? You bet I did not. I count this as a victory that my second eldest child, who tends to be a bit of a worrier, and she even used to have kind of a worry about those bedbug creatures, she said that one of the things that she was most grateful for as she was looking back on her year was the time that we spent as a family at that house in Dallas and the time that we enjoyed, especially in the pool there. So I think it's a major victory that her experience was not impacted by the encounter with this potential fear. We tamed the wilderness by showing them how to be brave in the face of it. I think we can't really help it. We just are authorities. We're going to show them what to do by what we do. I'm starting to realize that my children aren't helped by my blabbing on about concerns. It doesn't make them smarter. It doesn't make them more discerning, really. Now, please understand me. I'm saying something kind of subtle. So I want you to notice I've never said that you should ignore your children's feelings and you should never ignore your own. I've never said that you should encourage your children to stuff their feelings. I've never said that having mixed feelings is bad. For me, I'm pretty good at having mixed feelings. In fact, I'm pretty good at verbalizing my mixed feelings, my concerns, my critiques. I think I'm probably too good, in fact. Mostly when I express mixed feelings, they don't come out as good and bad. They mostly come out as a criticism or a complaint. And I've been altogether probably too good at teaching my children how to do this. Too often I say things like, X and Y are pretty good, except this negative thing, Z, which in my children's mind, Z overshadows X and Y, limiting myself in terms of how I share and what I share with my children. Because I'm not yet very good at being brave when confronted with annoying or small circumstances. I'm good at being brave in tough situations, like when everyone's down with the flu. I am cheerful, I'm patient, I'm loving. I'm one of those moms that's really good at nighttime parenting. I've got all kinds of tenderness for the middle of the night. I'm good at rising to the occasion. But right now, I'm working at being braver about the small details of my life. I've not yet done a good job at teaching my children to accept small irritations cheerfully as just a matter of course. This is a personal limit I need to acquire because, like it or not, I am an authority to them. The way I express my emotions is giving them a map. The point of all this is a healthy emotional life for each child and for our whole family. I prized emotional authenticity because I thought it contributed. In fact, I thought it was the whole of having an emotionally healthy person. However, I've realized that emotional authenticity doesn't necessarily have to be the same as bickering and complaining all the time as a way to show that you're better than your siblings or that you're wiser than everyone else around you. That's not the same as emotional authenticity. In fact, it's actually inhibiting us from connecting with each other, the negative habits. It's inhibiting us from liking each other, enjoying each other. So we got to quit that stuff. Right now, we're trying to make gratitude a goal for our family as an antidote to our complaining. Limiting our negativity is really a choice, and it's a choice to try to improve the emotional climate of our family. Because the negativity just breeds negativity. The more grateful you are, the more you realize what there is to be grateful for. We need to exert our intelligence differently. So I'm using my authority to point us in a new direction. First, we had several conversations with our children about this new direction. We also made posters with inspirational quotes and hung them in our dining room to help remind us to be grateful. And at dinner, we are trying to have each child name the number of things they're grateful for as years old they are. So our 5-year-olds name 5 things they're grateful for from that day. The 9-year-old names 9 things, and the 11-year-old names 11 things. I really want to encourage you today to take heart. Your children will take you for an authority, whether or not you take yourself for one. So we might as well own it. It's a little bit like what Galadriel says to Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring. This task was appointed to you, and if you do not find a way, no one will. We can take heart because this has been given us to do. As much as I want to sympathize, girl, you gotta adult today. There's no getting out of it. So go ahead, decide on a good worth pursuing and hike towards it together. It's okay if you need to stop and have a lot of snacks and breaks. It's okay if you need other people to hike with. That's what community is for, right? That's partly why you're listening to this podcast, maybe. This podcast and your local community and your extended family, your history, your church, and let's not forget the books that you read. All of that is to help you have the best map you can so that you know where you're walking. You know where you're leading them, and you're not doing it alone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this conversation. If you are interested in more, I would love it if you would visit our website, brightwingschildrensbooks.com. There you'll find a list of books that have been helpful to me in formulating these ideas. And as well, I think there should be an essay there that talks about this same theme from a different angle, how to integrate our highest principles with the details of daily life, and how rules and limits help us with this integration.